So how do we tell when a young ball python is old enough and big enough to be able to breed? Well, we're going to use our ultrasound. What ultrasound? I don't have an ultrasound. Well, we're going to use our common sense ultrasound. This is a ball python egg. It's about 4 centimeters by 6 centimeters, and we're going to use this as our reference for body size in our female snakes. The size of the egg is not determined by the size of the female. It's determined by how much nutrients need to be packed into that egg in order to sustain the embryo until it hatches. So even a small ball python is going to have to push out an egg of that size. Yes, there's some variability, but it's not actually a great deal. All the new breeders out there are going, but I don't have a ball python egg. How am I going to gauge? Use a chicken egg. It's about the same size. So let's do it. Let's common sense ultrasound some of our small female snakes and see whether they're ready to breed. Okay guys, so I don't have an ultrasound, and as I've shown you, we're going to use our common sense ultrasound to look at a few young females. The guidelines for beginning to breed ball pythons is usually around 18 months and 1500 grams, and this would be for the start of pairing your snakes. Another reference that's often used is how many winters it is for the female, and people would look to start breeding in their second or third winter. But I live in the tropics and my snakes do not experience winters. I think my growth rates for my snakes probably vary, and certainly my season is year round, so I do have snakes that are maturing throughout the year rather than all my holdbacks maturing at the same time. So I am aiming to start pairing, and I stress again, start pairing sometime between 18 months and 2 years old for my first time females. We're going to look at some snakes today that are around about 18 months old. The dates are not exact. I didn't dig out the exact hatch date, but that doesn't really matter because we're not actually using that as a reference. So sometime between 18 months and 2 years old, I'm looking at starting to pair my first time females, and this means that they will go on to lay, if indeed they do go on to lay, anytime between 2 and 3 years of age for a first time female. So that will be her first clutch sometime between 2 and 3 years of age. What I'm aiming for in my first time breeder females is actually to reach a point where before they lay eggs they are over 2 years old and over 2000 grams. I think that's even more important than the weight that they start at is the weight that they finish at. And one of the critical things that you must do is be certain that she is going to put on the weight that she will need in order to lay a clutch of eggs and not end up pitifully small at the end of it. So the first snake we're going to look at is one that is exactly that. This girl here, 2 years old. I don't normally weigh my females. I feel that weighing them, particularly on the run up to breeding, encourages you to chase the scales and put on that last little bit of weight just to get them up to breeding size. But this girl at the start of the season, she'd started to ball hug. She was looking quite thick, quite chunky. You can see my hand here next to her. She is still eating very strongly as she was at the start of the season, and she has gone through that monster eating phase, and she has been paired since the start of the season, and I am continuing to pair this girl because she's looking very, very good. This is one girl that I'm not concerned about, and I did actually go through and weigh the girls that we're going to look at today just so that you guys have a reference. This girl now weighs 1910 grams, 1910 grams. So in the last few months since she started to be paired, she's been eating ravenously. There's still a way to go. So this is one girl that certainly is both mature enough and large enough to breed. And if we use our common sense ultrasound as a reference, this girl is not going to have too much difficulty. Her body size is well capable of taking these eggs. She hasn't completely developed follicles yet. She will put on more weight and more size as we go, but this girl is one that certainly can breed. One of the key factors when you pair up your young snakes is that they are eating well and gaining weight, and we're going to look at some 18-month-old females, some of which I have just started to pair, some of which I haven't, and I must stress that all of these females are still eating regularly. When I refer to them as not eating ravenously, I mean that ravenous phase that females when they're building go through when their food response goes through the roof. All of these girls are eating regularly. We're not going to talk about the 1,000-gram wall. Richard at Predator BP put out an excellent video on some theories behind the 1,000-gram wall. Of course I do have my own ideas, and I think I know what's going on with those females, but we're not actually going to talk about that today. All of these females are past that phase, and the ones that are actually being paired are giving me all the signs that they want to breed. This girl, here's my hand for scale, 18 months old. She's looking nice and thick and chunky actually. She's in very, very good condition. But she's not giving me the signs that she wants to breed. She's not bowl hugging, she's not eating ravenously, and if we use our common sense ultrasound meter here, you'll see that she is actually a little bit smaller than the female that we've just looked at. This one is definitely pushing it for breeder size. So she is not being paired, and I did weigh her yesterday and she weighs 1,447 grams. The usual guidelines are 18 months and 1,500 grams, but I think you can see here that this girl probably isn't quite ready yet. Maybe she's one to watch a little bit later in the season if she shows signs that she wants to go, but this girl is not being paired at this point in time. Now I need to zoom out for this one, which gives you an indication that she is a little bit larger. This girl is just coming up to 18 months old, and at the start of the season she did start to bowl wrap and she did start to eat ravenously. Here's my hand for scale. So this girl is now coming up to the right sort of age where we would start to consider possibly breeding her. How big is she? Well, if we use our common sense ultrasound, you can see that she is actually quite chunky. She could accommodate eggs of that size. As I said, it would be the start of her build if we started to pair her. So she is still eating ravenously. She is gaining weight. She's giving me all the signs that she wants to breed. And in actual fact, at the middle of January, I did pair her up for the first time and got an immediate lock. So this is one girl that is just on the cusp, and I now need to monitor quite carefully to see that she continues to gain weight and continues to bowl wrap and show me all the signs that she wants to breed. If that is the case, I will continue to pair her and we'll follow through on the breeding. This girl is both old enough and big enough, but she is a first-time female, and therefore we do need to watch her quite carefully. How much does this girl weigh? This girl weighs 1,525 grams. Just to give you a reference, I weighed her yesterday. I didn't weigh her before I paired her up. I used my common sense ultrasound. Here's another 18-month-old female, bless her, bowl hugging, and I weighed her yesterday at 1,530 grams, and using our common sense ultrasound Yep, I think that one gets a pass. I did hold off on this girl at the start of the season. She was paired up just a couple of days ago, and again, instant lock. This is another first time young female just on the cusp of breeding age. She is big enough and she is old enough. Let's take a look at this girl here. The earlier female that you saw is her sister, and this girl is 1486 grams, about the same size, but she has not been bowl hugging. She's not really been giving me any signs. If we use our common sense ultrasound, you can see that she is the same size as her sister, just not quite as chunky. She's right on the cusp, but until yesterday she was giving me no indication whatsoever that she was considering breeding. And I opened her tub last night just to give her a check, and she came flying out. This girl is starting to eat ravenously. She has not been paired. I wouldn't consider pairing this girl until she starts behaving as if she does want to breed. So there's my common sense ultrasound. You can see that all these girls are right on the cusp, should I or shouldn't I? And I'm allowing the girls themselves to dictate what happens based on their behaviour. So this is one girl that has not been paired yet, and I will not pair her until she starts behaving as if she does want to breed. So let's put her back. Spider girl, 18 months old, 1485 grams, right on the cusp, using our common sense ultrasound. Yep, she could possibly squeeze an egg of that size into her body if she potentially want to be paired. And this is going to be controversial because she's a spider, but yes, this is one that I'm looking at beginning to pair right now in the season. She's right on the cusp. She has been giving some indication that she might want to breed. There is one female at the end that we will take a look at that's doing the typical ball python thing and being a little bit picky, and I'll give you my thoughts on that particular female and the remedies that I'm employing. Okay, let's take a look at the bumblebee calico girl. She's actually been a little bit of a fussy eater just recently, not eating ravenously, not bowl hugging, not giving any indication at all that she wants to breed. And if we use our common sense ultrasound meter, that's a definite no. She is not big enough to breed yet. And I did weigh her yesterday, and sure enough, 1019 grams. Does that number sound familiar? All the other females that are the same age in this breeding room have continued to eat right throughout the season. They're eating very strongly, and this girl is doing what all ball pythons do at some stage during their life. She is getting a little bit picky. Now, am I worried about that? No, absolutely not. She's in perfect health. There is nothing wrong with this snake. She's not skinny. And again, going back to common sense, if you think about her growth rate, she has reached 1,000 grams in 18 months. They take a lot longer in the wild, and so our captive bred snakes, we end up in the dilemma of, well, she's 18 months, so she's old enough, and she's 1,500 grams, so she's big enough, she ought to breed. Just bear in mind that in the wild that would never be an issue, because almost certainly by the time that a female snake gets to the size where she can breed, she is going to be far older than our captive bred snakes. So you cannot compare apples to apples, and it's also unfair to make the comparison of wild snakes being 4 years old and our captive bred snakes being 18 months old before they breed. It's a totally different situation. So this girl is clearly not ready to breed. She's not putting out scent, she's not leaving her calling card in the tub, she's not bowl wrapping, she's not cooling, she's not eating well. And I think part of our responsibility as breeders of snakes is not only to recognise all the signs when our females want to breed, but the onus is on us also to recognise all the signs when a female does not want to breed. Many breeders will say, well, hey, let's just stick a male in with her and get him to mate with her, and that will start her eating again, and she may actually go on to give us a clutch of eggs. My take on that is, hey, let's not. And I've heard the argument that, well, it's up to the snakes. If they want to breed, they'll breed. How on earth is it up to the snakes when they live in a tub, have no way of avoiding, they're not putting out scents to attract a male, and you go ahead anyway and put a male in the tub? One of the possible outcomes that I've heard is that, yes, she starts eating. Yes, she starts developing follicles. Yes, she goes on and gives us a clutch of eggs. Well, yes, that is one of the possible outcomes that we could get from pairing up a snake this young. I don't think I need to run through all the possible other scenarios that could occur that nobody talks about. The prolapsed oviducts, the internal ruptures, the egg binding that can occur with a young female of this size that does go on to try and give us a clutch of eggs that is apparently her choice. Let's not forget our basic animal husbandry techniques. Just because this is a female that's coming up to breeder age and we're impatient to breed her, let's not throw all of our knowledge out of the window and do something silly. What I'm going to suggest for this girl is that we put her in a smaller tub and put her in a smaller rack. That's what you would do for any other ball python that goes off food, so that's what we're going to do for this girl. We're going to put her in a small tub, stick her in a small rack, and see what happens. Here's the smaller tub. It's one of my grow-on tubs. We're going to stick this girl into this nice tight space, just as we would for any other ball python that goes off food. She is no different. Just because she's a female that's coming up to breeder age, we're going to stick her in the grow-on rack and see whether she comes back onto food. And not only does that give the stubborn female a chance to settle down in a tighter space and reacclimatise and perhaps start slamming food again, it frees up a slot in my breeder female rack that I can now use for this awesome girl. This is my yellow belly desert ghost female, now well over a year old, and she's outgrown the grow-on rack that we've just swapped out for the calico bumblebee that is being a little picky. This girl is not being picky, she's growing fast, and yes, whilst I am keen to get this girl up to size and breed her, she is definitely not a candidate this year. She is way too small. If we use our common sense ultrasound on this girl, you can see that she would be no way ready to breed, but the extra space may actually encourage her to grow a little faster. So she goes into the breeder rack, not to be bred, but to give her more space, and the calico bumblebee goes into the grow-on rack to see whether she settles down in the tighter space and starts eating more confidently again. Alright guys, some questions that I've had related to males, pairing your males up. Remember that it is actually ovulation, when your females ovulate, that the eggs are actually fertilized. So do make sure that you continue to pair your males at regular intervals with your females until they actually ovulate. That is the time that the eggs are fertilized. The females are paired with the male once every 3 weeks, and the male gets the rest of the week off. You will see that in the last episode I did actually put a male snake in with 2 females that were approaching ovulation pretty much back to back, and that's unusual for me, but no issues with that. This male is eating quite strongly. He has been a bit of a super stud this season. But another question I've been asked, yes, you can overwork your males, particularly if they're young males or if they are already a little bit stressed and not eating. Key factor for me in using my males is that they continue to eat. If they continue to eat throughout the breeding season, it gives you much more flexibility in the way that you use them, and you can push them a little bit harder. So do bear that in mind with your males. All my male snakes are eating very strongly, and if they don't, then I would consider actually arresting them, and that may involve actually removing them from the snake room to get rid of all the scents of the breeder females until they start eating again, and then I can bring them back and put them into the roster. I was asked a question about handling your snakes during the breeding season, and I'm all for enjoying your snakes. That is one of the reasons why we're in the hobby, and I encourage everybody to take time out and enjoy their snakes. But I think, as you would expect, during the breeding season, your prime consideration is actually the breeding of these animals, and I think you will find that your breeder females themselves will tell you that they're a little less tolerant of being handled. They get a little more territorial, and they will hiss their displeasure at being disturbed, understandably so. So my recommendation would be, unfortunately, try to minimize the handling of your female snakes. That's one of the compromises that you are going to have to make during the breeding season. So if you have snakes that are not being bred, go ahead and handle those. You need to be a little bit careful with your males, because they are also more sensitive at this time of year. They can get stressed out simply by the act of breeding and go off food, and handling probably doesn't help that situation. So again, let your snakes be the guide. I would recommend keeping handling of your breeder snakes to a minimum during the breeding season, and if you have other snakes in your collection, handle them instead. That would be a nice compromise. I was asked about reabsorption, and reabsorption is quite tricky because it's often very, very difficult to recognise. A female will start to build follicles. The eggs are not actually fertilised until ovulation. Your female may decide that conditions are not in her favour, and she will reabsorb. And strictly speaking, she's not reabsorbing the eggs that she is producing. Those follicles are still unfertilised, still in her ovary, and they are all tucked away in reserve for when she needs them. What's actually happening when she reabsorbs is those packages of nutrients that she's providing for the developing embryos when they're in the egg. It's those nutrients that she will reabsorb, and what that often means is that if your snake decides to reabsorb, she will go off food just in the same way as your other breeder females go off food, but for a different reason. Your breeder females go off food because their follicles are getting too large and they cannot eat. Your reabsorbing females will go off food because they're actually reabsorbing those nutrients and they have no need to eat. They're living off the contents of the nutrients that they're reabsorbing. So it can be very difficult to interpret. We looked at that, I think, in episode 4, if I'm not mistaken. So I did show you a female there that has lost condition. She's lost her glow, she's lost size, and I suspect that she is reabsorbing. I can tell you that she has not yet started to eat again, so we're keeping a close eye on her, and we will actually continue to pair her on schedule just in case we're mistaken. It's always best to have that insurance in the bag, but I will let you know when she starts eating again, and that would be the key indicator that your female has actually reabsorbed. She will go back onto food, which means that her follicles are no longer restricting her digestive system. She will be hungry and she will go back onto food. Another question is, what happens if I miss the ovulation? Okay, if you miss an ovulation, actually it doesn't really matter. Your female is going to go on and lay eggs. Ovulation is make or break, and once she's ovulated and those eggs are in the oviduct, she will go on to lay eggs. There are still certain behavioural indicators that will tell you that she has ovulated even if you missed the ovulation. One of those indicators is that she will have been off food for a month or more before she actually ovulates, and then she'll go into shed. and most of the time during the rest of the season our females shed at regular intervals as they grow. And if your female has been off food for several weeks and then sheds, and it is during the breeding season, you have been pairing her, the chances are that is the pre-lay shed, and 30 days later she will go on to lay eggs. But again, if you've missed it, just make sure that your egg boxes are prepared, and you won't get caught out if one morning you wake up and find your female sitting on a pile of eggs. Just deal with them in the same way as you would. You missed all the signs. Maybe next year or with the next female you will learn to recognize the signs and not miss the ovulation, but it isn't the end of the world. Your female will sort everything out for you. You'll wake up one morning and there'll be a pile of eggs for you to put in the incubator. So don't worry if you miss the ovulation. Another question that I've been asked is, what records do I keep? And I am much more diligent during the breeding season in keeping records. I usually keep a daily log of various snakes, but I stopped actually recording every little detail for every single snake in my collection a long time ago. I used to keep books for individual snakes, and obviously that became too onerous. But I do keep a book of what's happening daily in the snake room, sheds, and particularly feeding. I will make a note of which females are off food, and I also have a breeder book where I keep a very close record of my pairings, dates, and shedding intervals for my breeder females at this time of year. But typically what I use now is a system where I combine those notes with a system of coloured tags in the snake room. I think I've touched on this before. I put coloured tags on the tubs to represent various things. It gives me a visual appraisal of what's going on in the snake room. Whenever I come in, I can see at a glance which snakes are in shed, which snakes have been paired up, which snakes are my breeder females, and it helps very much if you have a visual reminder when you come into the snake room. So yes, everybody's different. Yes, I do keep quite stringent records, but a lot of those are actually kept in a daily log, and I log snakes that are not doing what I expect them to. If the snakes are behaving how they should, how I think they should, that is not recorded. It's only the ones that are doing something different that I need to pay special attention to that get special mentions in my daily notes. Okay guys, I am expecting delivery of a new thermostat from the UK. Very difficult to get thermostats out here other than Chinese made ones, which often are quite basic. This is a dedicated reptile thermostat, and I'm going to be building a new incubator, so watch out in a future episode for that incubator build. The incubator I have is still on standby, and I will probably use it in the initial parts of the season, but for this year it is going to be too small and I need to build a bigger one, so I'll bring you guys along for the ride when I build that incubator. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe. I hope this video helps, especially with those first time breeders who normally are doing it right but just need the reassurance that they are, and so I hope that helps you follow through at least with my season and see what's going on in my snake room. I wish you all the best for this coming season, and from Miso and me, we'll see you next time.